with the objective of bringing some experts in different fields of health so they can educate my audience and their audience on different subjects around health. And today we are here with Lauren, who has been a registered nurse for since 2001 and has cared for over 7,000 critically unwell babies requiring intensive care from birth. That is incredible in itself. I am so excited about our chat today because I really believe it's going to be so beneficial for so many people. As Lauren helps people now, is very passionate about helping babies and moms from preconception to early childhood with energy healing. But I'll let her explain a little bit more about it because I can't wait to learn myself more about it as well. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you for the introduction. So I've worked as a nurse for many years now and I've stepped out of the system. But what happened through looking after all of these babies at the most challenging time of their lives, if they're born requiring intensive care from birth. And so as a nurse myself, I found it very challenging to look after these babies and to try to understand why. Like that was my biggest question is like, why is this happening? There's these tiny babies who have just been born and they're starting off life in a really challenging way. And, I was thinking, they don't ask for this. Like, why did this happen? And I couldn't understand why. I've seen so much. I've seen the worst of birth and everything that can go wrong. I have seen, and I just didn't understand it when these innocent babies were caught up in these situations. And obviously the effect on families as well would be quite challenging. And so I actually left because I couldn't deal with how much suffering there was in the nursery with babies and the pain and the challenges that they were experiencing. And it had a big effect on me emotionally and mentally. And so I actually left and went overseas for a while just to take some time out. And when I came back, I started studying yoga and meditation and energy healing therapy and some other modalities. And about 6 years ago, while working in a hospital up in Brisbane, actually, my worlds collided and I started experiencing different things around babies and I began to understand them in different ways. So when I would touch a baby, for example, I was starting to be able to tune into babies' energy fields and to, I guess, gain some more awareness about what was going on for them and why things were happening. Because I think, as humans, we focus on our own experience. And I was really curious about, well, how does this look through a baby's eyes? Like, why, because through all of my spiritual study, I was learning that, our soul comes to the earth to have a human experience. And I was like, well, why would a baby's soul choose to come to the earth and have these experiences?
Yeah.
So as crazy as it seems, I began to ask them, I'm like, why is this happening? Like,
Wow.
why are you here, in intensive care, being born at 23 weeks, for example? And the most challenging part for me was when, babies didn't survive. I was so heartbroken around that. But through this work, I was able to learn more about, as I said, why this was happening. That big question that I had was, why? And so, I began to receive information from babies, and I also have a team of spirit guides who have been helping me out for many years, but I haven't really listened until probably the last, 6 to 10 years. And I began to just see a whole new world that began to, unfold. And I began to understand more about these whys, which then made it so much easier to continue working in that intensive care
Yeah.
environment without depleting myself and without
Yes.
traumatizing myself, and to be able to understand more. But the hard thing for me was that I wasn't able to share because I was
Mm.
working in a very clinical environment. There's very
Yes.
strict protocols and policies around that govern the care that I
Mm.
give babies and parents. And so I was having a lot of information come to me, but I wasn't in the right environment to be able to share that. So I've left the hospital now. It's
Wow.
nearly 2 years now, and so now I'm free to share these experiences with these babies' parents. And what started to
Yeah.
happen is it moved
Mm.
from just focusing on babies and like when they're born, and now this, I don't know what you call it, like this ability is now expanded to connecting with the souls of these babies even preconception. So
Mhm.
so yeah, it's been
Wow, that's
quite the
so
journey.
powerful. I have so many questions, so many things that you said here. So interesting. I think the first one is start with your why, right? Like I was talking to a friend this morning and I said, I'm so excited about understanding more about us. But I said, I don't think I would be ready to receive those messages myself. And I think that you started with the why, which meant that you were ready to receive those messages, right? Which is incredible. And of course, it took a while, like a journey for you to get there. But I think it's really beautiful that you were so curious because I think once we ask questions, we always receive an answer. Like we always
Yeah.
receive, God, life, the universe. I really believe that. And once you're ready, you can receive the answer immediately. But if you are not completely ready at the time, it is a journey. And I think another very important point that you said was, like as human beings being in that environment, like I said, it must have been so difficult and depleting emotionally. But once you start connecting to them differently, you were able to have a different level of strength, but right, like to support
Yeah.
them and the
Yeah.
families around them, which is again, it's
Absolutely.
and I think for people that are watching this and thinking like, oh, this is just too maybe woo woo for me. I mean, I just want to add my own experience around doing a course in Reiki. I think that we all have within us to open up the connection to this energy field that we're surrounded with. And I have given Reiki to some of my clients and some of my family members, and if I have to do this continuously, I get better and better at it. But if I stop
Hmm.
doing it, you kind of lose the connection. So of course, in your case, is that as soon as you're ready and you try, you were connecting with them, it's a real thing. This is just it is not like I have experienced myself, and I can so back you up on that. That it can be so real, so palpable for you. That it's there in the journey with this energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's definitely a component of, as exactly as you said, being ready to, well, one, asking the question is one thing, but being ready to receive an answer is quite another. And
Mm,
I did not like the answers I was given to start with. I took time off work because I thought I was going crazy. And because
yeah.
being a nurse, I'm very left-brained. I'm used to science. I'm used to evidence-based. I'm used to
Yes.
very black and white ways of thinking. And so when I started, having these experiences and receiving the answers to these questions, as I said, I took time off work because I thought I was going mad. And I think I've been and continue to be at times my own biggest skeptic because I'm very discerning in the information I take in. I don't believe everything I hear. And so it's been a real process for me because it's been a journey from just starting to open myself up to a different way
Mm,
of receiving babies, a different way of caring for babies, and a different way
mhm,
of supporting them in ways that certainly as a nurse with, as you said at the beginning, I've cared for over 7,000 babies. And
mhm.
I've so I like, again, from that science-based brain, like I thought I
Yeah.
knew what I was doing, you know, but as they have shared information with me, and you know, I ignored it for probably the first 12 months. I'm just like, I've just got a really active imagination, you know, I just, you know,
Yeah.
because I've got a very creative mind and I love to imagine and dream, and I thought it's just that. So I ignored it. But it kept happening,
Yeah.
and the information coming through, just, it kept happening. It kept coming through. It's like I'd opened this door and I didn't know how to close it again. And so, yeah,
Wow.
I've been my own biggest skeptic. And I find with the women I work with, you know, they're all at different stages. Some also have like that sense
Mhm.
of curiosity. It's like, I'm not sure if I believe it, but I'm curious
Mhm.
about what might come through.
Yes.
And other women, you know, they could be in their 60s and 70s, and they, you know, and they can still find out information from their babies, especially if they had a pregnancy loss at some point as well. And
Mhm.
they're at that point before they're ready to listen. And then I work with women who
Yes.
have experienced a pregnancy loss last month, and it's very raw, obviously, but they're open to receiving it. So I guess my mission is to just, you know, I guess taking from my own path around being open to receive the information,
Yes.
and you know, we're all our own individual, and we all get to choose what we believe and what we don't. So I feel like
Yeah.
my mission is to share the information and to share the messages, and it's up to the client or the mother if or how she receives that information.
Yeah. I think that's I had a personal experience. I had an ectopic pregnancy, and
Mhm.
which is, it can be quite traumatic because,
Mhm.
I started feeling pain, and before I knew I was in the emergency department. Before I knew I was like, you're about to die if we don't go in and do this surgery. And I remember when the doctors came in and said, it's definitely, we had to take the tube out and one of your ovaries, so the chances of you being pregnant again has kind of reduced to half. And leading to that pregnancy, I didn't want to be pregnant. It wasn't something that we planned. It wasn't something, and I felt like really irresponsible for not, for being in that situation. I was together with my husband and everything, but we had just started our life in New Zealand, and I feel that now, like, that soul, that being, realized that I wasn't, ready for that.
Mhm.
um, and I was very, very blessed that after that, I got pregnant
Mhm.
very quickly, 4 months later, because I only had half chances of getting pregnant. Um, and I feel there is so I would love you to talk about this period of, especially after people go through a miscarriage and they're trying to get pregnant again. It can be so stressful. Like, I made a conscious effort not to be
Yeah.
stressed about it. I said to my husband, look, let's just not be consumed by this. Let's just play with what we've got
Mhm.
here. Let's just not like go crazy about, like, having sex at 12:01 and measure things.
Yeah.
Let's just not do that. This is just not cool at all. Let's just, do our lives and have the intention. And I got pregnant really quickly. For me, it was very much like a deciding factor. I feel like I needed to go through that to make a decision. Do you want to be a mom or not? But again,
Mhm.
like, it's
Mhm.
how ready you are. Instead of picking up that experience and going like, oh, poor me, I went from this. I was like, okay, well, you need to make a decision, and you need to make a decision fast, because I was about 31. Do you want to be a mom or not? And again, leading to that, I did not want to be a mom. I was too scared. I was like, no, this is too much responsibility and all of that. And then when they said, that's it, half of her chances are gone, I was like, you know what? I want to be a mom. And if I
Mhm.
want to be a mom, I need to put some focus and effort into that
Mhm.
without being super stressed about it.
Mhm.
So maybe give an example of a client that you have worked in, like in a similar situation like that, that you have
Hmm.
been able to help them, because I really hope that so many people that are listening to this can share this, and if they are going through this, that they can reach out to you, because it can be quite a sad and frustrating and
Hmm.
stressful time.
Like absolutely, and that, and there's so many perspectives to this as well, to this period of time in a woman's life. And one thing I've really come to understand is that any sort of pregnancy loss, there's always a deeper meaning behind that. And from what I understand, listening
Mm,
to your story, it helped you to get clear on a decision that you needed to
yes.
make, whereas that previously you hadn't
Yeah.
considered. And I think it's really important to understand that babies have different purposes in our lives and they don't always come to stay. I think that's a belief that we as society tend to expect, is that every
Hmm.
pregnancy should be like a healthy, happy baby. And, we want to fall pregnant and we should fall pregnant straight away. And there's so many expectations on this. But but as you've learned, like there's lots of different
Yeah.
reasons for why these things can happen. And I'll tell you a story about a client in a moment. But what I'm realizing too is that I just want to touch on the energy of conception, and you said it so beautifully, because we put so much pressure on ourselves, right? And we put so
Mm,
on our bodies and our hormones and our
yeah.
age and all of this sort of thing. And
Yeah.
and I loved how you said that, yes, you had, the doctors said, oh, it could be hard for you to fall pregnant because of the ectopic and
Yeah.
removing the tube and the ovary. But, but you were like, let's just try. Let's just not obsess about
Yeah.
it. Let's just go. And I think that's a really beautiful insight into the energy of conception, because babies can
Yeah.
find it really energetically challenging to come to earth through
Mm,
an energy that's, I must fall pregnant. Why am I not falling pregnant? There's something wrong with my body. I'm
yeah.
too old. It should have happened by now. What's wrong with me? I should have done that. I should
Yeah.
have done that. So when there's all of that we're putting into that conception space or that conception energy, that can actually block babies from coming and make it really, really challenging. Whereas if we go into a
Yeah.
space of, I invite you to come, I would love
Mm,
to invite you into our lives, or I feel ready, or whatever
yeah.
words that feel right, then we allow them to come to us rather than us trying to chase them. And so I'll just share briefly about, I worked with a mum who, she had a toddler, um, and she'd experienced at least one miscarriage. It could have even been two from memory. And, and she was mid-30s and she was really desperate to have another
Yeah.
child and was really struggling to her cycle. There was nothing physically wrong, but her cycle
Mm,
was predictable, all of these things. But she just
yeah.
wasn't able to fall pregnant. And she was becoming really frustrated because she could sense that there was a baby. And she's like, well, why aren't you coming? Um, and so this is like a slightly different perspective on the whole thing. But what we actually realized when I tuned into them is that the toddler was probably, I don't think he was 2 yet. So he was somewhere between 18 months and 2 years old
Mm.
from memory. And so he was very young, and he was still breastfeeding as well, which mum was like, maybe, that's
Oh,
stopping me from conceiving. And sometimes that's true, sometimes not. I know
yeah.
lots of women who fall pregnant when they're breastfeeding, so that's not a definitive like form of contraception. But yeah, in this particular situation, it's like, I need a bit more time. I need a bit more space before another
Yeah.
child comes in.
I know.
Mum's like, I'm trying to do all the right things and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and all of this.
Yeah.
But when we realized that it was actually her toddler that was resisting the conception of this next child, we did some work around that. We did some energy healing with mum,
Beautiful.
did some energy healing with the toddler remotely, so he didn't have to be there. And mum also had a conversation and put some strategies into place with her toddler, and he self-weaned off like breastfeeding within a week,
Wow.
and she fell pregnant the following month. So, and her baby, she must be 2 years old now, I think. The second child is actually probably around the
Yeah,
same age as a toddler was. So yeah, so I think it shows that the energy around conception and
yeah,
what is going on, whether it's with the mother or the partner, the couple, it can
yes,
if there's a lot of stress in your life, then the body will naturally think it's not safe to bring a baby into the world, and so
mm-hmm.
either won't ovulate or won't allow implantation. So there's the physical side, there's also the emotional stressful side, and there's also the spiritual side.
Yeah,
If this next baby doesn't want to come to earth right now, or wants to wait for whatever reason, and there's lots of reasons why they choose to wait, then it doesn't matter what we do and how stressed we get, we're not going to bring that child
yeah,
here quicker. And so
mm,
that's what I'm really passionate about. It's like, well, let's jump into their world and see why they're coming, why they're not coming, what's blocking them,
mm,
what we can do to support them, because they will tell us. As I said,
yeah,
as we talked about earlier, ask the question, you'll get an answer. If we say to these babies, like, why aren't you coming? Or not even that, it's like, how can we support you to come? How can we help you
yes,
be ready? They will tell us, and then we can go on to
mm,
put those into place. So I feel like it's
yeah,
the missing piece of the puzzle to all of this, because it's, the babies have just as probably an even bigger part of the picture than us when it comes to coming into the world. We've all done it, we've all made that leap, and I have a lot of what's the word? Wouldn't say certainty, but I've had a lot of experiences that I'm sure that all of us came to earth on our own terms, not just because our mum wanted to be
yes,
now. It's like we have our own
I
reason
agree.
coming too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with my second child was the same thing. I was breastfeeding my son, same situation, and I had a work trip that I was dreading to go to because I had to stop breastfeeding him, and he was a year and a half, and he probably didn't want to be breastfed anymore. I was just holding on to that thing, and so I had to stop breastfeeding him. No, I was like, oh, I don't want to, but it's time as well. And then my husband, and it's really really beautiful what you said about it's not only about the mom but about the partner, like your partner
Mhm,
as well. My husband really said to me like, look, we need to have another baby like now because I don't want to do this in another 3 years time. Like this is too hard. Like let's just get on with it and do it. And all of like my friends were getting pregnant and around us, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, like maybe we should do this. And because I was so consumed by this trip, I just felt pregnant.
mhm,
Like
mhm.
I was
Yeah.
focused on something else,
Mhm,
and I think like if anything, now that you're saying this, I can feel that my husband's energy, it was very much on the receiving, and my son's energy, was very much on like in the receiving as well, because my son and my daughter, they are very close, and they are 2 years apart, and my daughter was almost born on the same day as him, which was I
wow.
thought like, please don't, yeah.
Bit
Can
of
you just
space.
not do the C-section on the same day, Anna?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think like what you said is so important, is a combination of the energy that is surrounded, the whole family, not just, the mom, or the
Mhm,
relationship between the mom and I also experienced something, personal with a friend who lost a baby after a week of being born and having to go through the heart surgery. And
mhm,
as you probably experienced, being on hospital and intensive care. And I
mhm,
happened to go and visit her at the time that he died, and I
mhm,
and I saw him in hospital,
mhm.
um, and we spent some time with him without everything, like all the tubes and all the, like it was just this. Um, I felt that his energy was so pure and so um, beautiful, and it was very hard for me to understand what had happened. And of course for her, and for her husband, I can't imagine the pain that they had to go through.
Yeah.
They have a daughter now and all the rest of it, and they're still together, which is beautiful. But how do you help people go through this transition? I remember that we after spending some time with him in this, and I remember vividly like his energy and the connection in everybody in the room, and going down the lift, and it was in London, and then all of a sudden the world like hits you like a wave, and you're like, how am I supposed to even put one step in front of the other after this experience?
Yeah.
And it was not even my child. I mean, how can you talk us a little bit about that, and also how maybe perhaps you support one of your clients around that?
Yeah, for sure. That was, losing a baby is, as a professional, as a nurse, was, that was so challenging, um, emotionally, as well as, the care as well. So I can't even imagine what it's like, for a parent to be in that situation, and as you
Yeah,
say, to leave the hospital without them. And, but I guess what I learned, because again, I was asking the questions, and I'm like, why does this happen?
yeah,
And I had some very profound experiences around this where I witnessed, I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they're called shared death experiences. It's where you actually witness the death of another soul. And I've had 3 in my nursing career where a baby has actually come to me on 2 separate occasions, prior to them leaving the earth. One, I knew the baby was very unwell and was unlikely to survive, so that was expected. The other one was very
uh-huh,
unexpected. And and I guess what I've learned through these experiences is that it's really important to be able to hold both. We need to be able to hold ourselves in the humanity of it all, and the grief and the
mm-hmm,
pain and the heartbreak. It's a very
mm-hmm,
real experience. It's a very human experience. Um, it's very, we're in it, we're living it. But it's also one side of the coin. And I guess as a nurse, because it wasn't my child that I was experiencing, so I
mm,
had a little more space, a little bit more separation there. Being able to gain insight into what was happening at that point spiritually are some of the most profound experiences for me
mm,
spiritually, but also the most joy I felt and the most peace that I've felt. So it's been really challenging to be able to hold both, because on one side,
yeah,
I'm witnessing the loss of a baby. I'm witnessing a baby,
mm,
someone's baby, someone's son or daughter, like leaving the earth. But at the same time, there's like this behind the scenes look at what's happening from the other side. And to me, being able to hold both, because the way I see birth and death is that when a baby is born onto the earth through birth, there is like a death from the spirit realm. And so they are birthing onto the earth. And when a baby or anybody leaves the earth realm, sorry, they leave earth through death,
yeah,
they're being born again into the spirit realm. So there's like this cycle that goes around. And the word birth or death is only, to me, about the direction that it's going. So as I said, when we come to earth, we're being born, but there's
mm-hmm,
from the spirit realm,
yes,
and vice versa. So I feel like life and death, or birth and death, are 2 sides of the same coin. It just depends on the direction that we're going. And so working with these women, and I expect, I'll keep the details quite broad just because for confidentiality. And this was
yes,
a recent client, and she experienced, her baby passed away at about a week or 10 days of age, because
mm-hmm,
had a lot of, mum had a really profound complication during birth, which really compromised the
yes,
baby,
I,
and there was a lack of blood supply to the baby. So the baby was born
mm-hmm,
initially okay, but then over a period of days began to deteriorate really, really quickly. And it became quite evident after about a week that the baby wasn't going to survive. And so, I mean, I wasn't working in the hospital then, this was a private client. And so when we were able to tune into that, and it was probably, I think when mum came to me, I think it was maybe about like 6 months ago, like
Yeah.
previously. I can't remember exactly the time frame, but it was about 6 months prior. So it was still, you know, quite raw, and a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
tender emotions obviously very present. So when we tuned into this baby and connected with this baby, and it's like, again, I asked that question, why? That's like my most favorite
Yeah.
question to ask.
Yeah.
And you know, when we tuned into that soul, there was what happened in this situation is that the complication that mum had, um, if there was no way that both mother and child could come out of that situation, what's the word, in healthy ways, because mum had had some type of fit or some type of seizure,
Yeah.
and was ended up unconscious in ICU, very, very sick, very unwell. And dad was, I'm going to lose both here. And
Yeah.
and what happened though at that penultimate moment, like when the child, you know, is obviously faced with this decision. You know, it's come to earth, it's gone through the 9 months of pregnancy, everything's okay. And then this happens with mum. And obviously the physical body of the baby is then threatened. And so then there's this choice that the child needs to make about,
Yeah.
if I stay, then one, I'm going to have a very limited life in many ways, and that's not what I planned.
Yes.
It's also going to mean lots of intervention, lots of appointments, lots of financial
Yeah.
things going on. And, you know, this mother, she did have another couple of children from memory. And so the child's like, but if I, and how is she going to cope with all of these? How is
Yeah.
she going to cope with the children and with me? But also they had to get this baby out really, really quickly. So it ended up being an emergency cesarean. And then mum was, she was still in a coma and all of this. So it's very traumatic for everyone. But as I said, when we tuned into this soul, he was like, I had to make a decision
Yeah.
to stay or to go.
Yeah.
And I chose to go because there wasn't a way forward that we could both come out of this in a healthy way. If I
Yeah.
survived, then it was going to have a massive impact on the entire family. And that this child, again, and this is what I mean about looking at the baby's experiences and the baby's reasons and their perspective, is that was the decision that this child was faced with. And so it was a boy from memory, decided, you know, I'm going to go now.
Yeah.
So then that way mum can, you know, she can recover. She can,
Focus. Yeah. And
of
recover
course
and
she's
focus on
going
the
to
other
have,
children. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And she did fall pregnant
Yeah.
about 3 years later with the same soul, came back again. It's like, okay, let's do
Oh
things
wow.
differently this time. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that just to show that, you know, we there's so many ways to, and I know this is such a, I'm very conscious, it's a very sensitive topic to talk about, with any
Yeah.
loss, whether it's miscarriage, whether it's termination, whether it's stillbirth, or whether it's
Yeah.
of a child once they're born. Very sensitive, very challenging. But what I'm finding is healing for so many women who have been through loss of some sort is
Yes.
to see this other side of the coin, is being able to find that peace. They're able to,
Yeah.
women will carry some sort of guilt around, you know,
Yes.
if only I'd done that, or if I'd gone to hospital
Yes.
earlier, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And when they see that
Yeah.
actually
The
it wouldn't
same
have
thing happened
mattered,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And
it's,
what you're
mm,
describing here, it happened with you know, my friend as well. Like
mm,
she knew that the baby was going to have you know, the heart issues, and she
yeah,
knew that the baby would need surgery straight away.
mm-hmm,
And the birth was incredibly difficult to, you know, on
mm-hmm,
top of it.
mm-hmm,
And then, you know, he did have the surgery as soon as he
yeah,
came out, but you know, after a week, you know, he was in intensive care. She had never held him because he was, you know, in an incubator and all of that. And like
mm-hmm,
I said, you know, I really believe that there is that moment of choice, right? Do you want
yeah,
to live that life? You know, which,
yeah,
you know, she had been told that perhaps, you know, he was never going to be like a normal like kid, or, you know, like doing normal
mm-hmm,
things. They didn't know. They couldn't tell her what his life was going to be about.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think again, for people that are listening to this and thinking like, oh, this is just too, you know, crazy for me to think because it's too out there.
Yeah.
Um, there is a story that, in a different context, but again, the mother and child connection. JJ Virgin, which is I think she's a celebrity dietitian, or
Mhm.
she used to help people with weight loss, and
Mhm.
she got a book about mindset and things like that. And her son had a brain injury.
Mhm.
He had an accident, and they said like, look, it's like a 3% chance of survival.
Mhm.
And they airlift him to another hospital. And she said she had this moment where she came out of the hospital. They said, look, the surgeon said, I think we can, you know, operate him, but we don't know if he's going to survive after that. You know, the operation's fine, but after that is another story.
Yeah.
And she came out of the hospital and she connected to him and said, do you want to live or die? You know,
Yeah.
should I go, should I say yes to this?
Mhm.
And she
Mhm.
received an answer. You know, again,
Mhm.
the answer, because she was ready to receive the answer. And
Yeah.
he said, yeah, you know, like, and then she went back and said, okay, well, let's do this. So
Yeah.
it is really, I think, you know, in moments like this, you know, when you want the answer right there, and
Mhm.
you are ready to receive, you do receive, because you know the mother and child connection is, it's a strong connection, I believe. And
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, I just want to give a different context for people to see that, you know,
Mm.
this is happening all the time,
Mm.
you know, and it is about us, like you said, being curious about it, right? Like, and open
Mm.
to
Mhm.
receiving a different perspective.
Mhm. And you know, and then to add, I guess, even another perspective into that, some babies choose before they come that they're not going to survive. So while there are some that, yes, need to make that decision, like we've both shared, there's also times where a baby is born with a particular condition or complication, um, and this can happen,
Hmm.
you know, if it's a result of you know, miscarriage or earlier in the pregnancy as well, is that they can, before they leave the spirit realm, before they conceive, they can have already made the decision that I'm I'm not going to stay on the earth, because again, it's that preconceived idea we all have as a society that every child should stay, and that we should all live until we're
Yeah.
100 and then we die in our sleep having had a good life. That's what society
Yeah.
tells us we should do, but there's very few people I know of that have had that experience. You know, there's all sorts of
Yeah.
things that can happen, and it's the
Yeah.
same with babies, and some of them don't want to stay if their reason to come to earth is to just try the earth. Like some, you know, it sounds a little bit crass in some ways, I guess, but you know, sometimes it can be like we go to a shop and we try on a dress that we may or may not
Yeah.
like, and then we may decide to, yes, I'll buy it, or no, I'm going to put that back on the shelf. And in my experience, and I say in my experience because I obviously haven't spoken to every single baby soul on the planet, but there's this
Yeah.
sense of wanting to come to earth to try before they commit.
Mhm.
And so if
Yes.
they're like, you know what, I'm just going to go to earth for a couple months, try what it feels like being attached to a physical body, then I'll do that. And some, if they have a slightly different purpose, can stay longer in the case of babies who are born with a condition, for example, that's not compatible with life, or there's very,
Yes.
very slim chance of survival. Then
Mhm.
I believe, and again, it's just my belief, I don't want to push this onto anyone else, but it's my belief that these children, um, again, they have a slightly different purpose, which is usually to unravel something or initiate something in their parents. Um, it's like a big
Mhm.
emotional unraveling, and it can also be the start of a spiritual awakening or a pivot in their life where they change direction. Similar to, you know, what you'd shared
Yeah.
earlier about, you know, when that happened with you with that ectopic, it changed your perspective,
Yes.
and it made you
Yeah.
make a different decision, and it put you on a different
Yes,
path
for sure.
to what you were on. So in
Yeah.
my experience, that's what some babies are coming here to do as well, is to put their parents onto a different path. It can cause the breakdown of a relationship at times, which can mean, if the relationship is not
Yes.
healthy to start with, that can be the thing
Yes.
that really breaks that and allows each person in that relationship to travel a different path. So,
Yeah.
so there's many reasons, but I do feel that there are babies who are born but never plan to stay on the earth. And either something happens shortly after birth, or as I said, they're born with a particular condition that is essentially going to
Yeah.
mean they won't survive, because they need something to be able to return to the spirit realm, because their purpose that's how they live out their purpose, which again sounds crazy. Like even my own brain is like, really? But again, it's about like opening our minds to
Yes.
a different way of viewing things. When we ourselves as
Yeah.
humans, if we can't figure out the why, then we need to look for
Mm-hmm.
why elsewhere. And sometimes when we do that,
Yes.
the why can look a bit weird or insane.
Yeah.
And again, we don't need to believe it, but
And
again, it's that different perspective.
yeah, I think you're so right. If I hadn't gone through that, the ectopic pregnancy, I wouldn't have made the decision to be a mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how strong that experience was for me.
Yeah.
And I'm a very black and white person. I'm very left brainy,
Yeah.
but I'm very stubborn. But I'm also when I'm ready, I'm a quick learner, and I go, okay, yeah, I got the message.
Yeah.
I know what I need to do.
Yes.
Like I'm not
Yes.
gonna mess around with this anymore. But I wanted to get your thoughts before you talk to us a little bit about how you can support other women, which I would love you to talk more into that. There is a massive increase in IVF, being done and in that industry, because people are getting coming across lots of difficulties in getting pregnant. I mean, how can you support maybe people going through that experience, which can be quite stressful and traumatic as well for physically, mentally, and emotionally?
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is one of the most
Mm.
common,
Yeah.
most common things that women ask me. And probably 50% of my women that I work with are actually are going through IVF, have finished IVF, or about to
Yes.
start. So the IVF, again, this has stretched my brain as well, because having worked in, the hospital and even though I didn't work
Yes.
in infertility, I worked with and supported a lot of women who had been through IVF and delivered their babies that needed intensive care. And so, again, when I tune into these children, and again, it's about a disclaimer here about expanding your brain as well, and just trying to see a different perspective, is when we talked earlier about how important that energy of conception is and what's happening at conception with mum, partner, environment, siblings, all of that sort of thing. It's like with IVF, that takes on a whole new level, because there's actually, like, when we think about the energy of conception, and it's all about what's going on with mum's body, it's the emotions, it's the mental, it's the stress, it's the relationship dynamics. And also even...
And it's a miracle, right? It's a
Yeah,
miracle. It's like it happens like in that second or not, right? It's
exactly.
absolutely a miracle.
Absolutely a
Yeah.
miracle. And with IVF, though, what I've learned is that there are some babies who prefer to come through IVF, because the energy of conception is very different with IVF as compared to natural conception. Because with natural conception, there can be all of that stuff going on that we've just talked about. Whereas with IVF conception, the energy is very different, because it's conceived in a lab. So you're away from the home environment, you're away from the relationship dynamics, you're away from the siblings, you're away from like the stress. And so these babies some are actually choosing to be born through IVF, because they get to bypass a lot of that, so that when they're conceived, that even though, yes, they go back into the mother's womb and implant there, so they are back in that space, but that initial moment of conception and those first few days, they're able to, all those little developing cells are able to happen away from that, which in my experience and therefore belief is that it's just a very different energy for them to start their life, which can help them to take on less of what's happening at the time. And there are women who, that, and I do feel that the babies have a lot of say in this, where especially those women where there's nothing physically wrong, all the blood tests are fine, the scans
Yes.
are normal, they're labelled as being infertile, but there's nothing physically wrong with them or the partner, and all his tests and
Yeah.
everything are fine. But when we tune into and look at the spiritual perspective and the baby's perspective of that, it's like, yes, I've chosen you as my parents, but I need to be conceived in a particular energy. And there are also
Wow.
kids too that are very willing to be part of the, I guess, progression of science as well, because IVF is
Yes.
still relatively new. There's, and I do believe it's going to
Yeah.
get so much better and a lot more effective over the coming years. And I believe that there are some babies who part of their soul's mission for coming to
What a bit.
is to help
Yeah.
support that. So I find when I
That's beautiful.
share this with women and say, what if your child wants to be conceived through IVF? And it's not about your body not being good enough, or your partner, or your
Yes.
cycle, or your hormones, or your egg quality. It's not about that. It's actually the fact that this child wants to be born through or conceived through a different energy that's a little bit cleaner,
Yeah, I really, yeah,
not taking on that energy. So
I think what you're saying is so beautiful that, I'm expanding my brain here now with this, in the sense of,
welcome to my
even
world.
yes, even the spiritual world, is evolving with us in the physical realm, right? Like we're doing it
Hmm.
together, and that's a massive example and part of it.
Hmm.
Because, like I said, IVF is here to stay, and
Yeah.
it's something that the science will keep improving, and it's almost like the spiritual world needs to adapt, or us adapting
Yeah.
to like coming together, you
Yes.
know, as human beings in this human experience, which is really, really beautiful. Now, I want to touch on something that perhaps I'm not sure if you can support women through. What about if a woman has gone through an abortion? So, of course, it was the
Yeah.
deciding, and I know that there is a lot of perhaps guilt and shame around that.
Yeah.
Um, how can you support them through? And I'm not saying that they should feel like that. I'm just saying that this is an
Mm.
important subject to touch, because I feel
Mm.
that there is so much information out there, and our society, in the same way as they tell us, you should be pregnant, have, beautiful
Hmm.
Instagram pictures, and everything's going to be
Hmm.
fine, and then the birth is going to be, perfect, and you're going to
Hmm.
live happily after. It's not quite like that.
No.
How can you support women? Yeah.
It's really, and I'm so glad that you're bringing up these topics. Honestly, I think they're so important for women to, for us to talk about these things so they're not hidden. Because I think even miscarriage can often be hidden away because women can feel like a failure. But with termination, I find it's a whole different level of guilt and shame. And in my experience, and often when women come to me and I ask them about their history, and a lot of them won't share about an
No.
abortion,
No.
or a termination because
Yeah.
of that shame. And it's only during a session it can come up, and I'm like, there's this other soul, and they're like, oh yeah, back when I was 17, and that. So in my
Yeah.
experience, what I've learned in these situations is that for me, there's only one difference between a miscarriage and a termination.
Yeah.
With a miscarriage, the baby's soul decides
Yeah.
to leave the world, and with a
Yeah.
termination or an abortion, the mother's soul decides. And
Yeah.
these, in my experience, most are pre-planned. So when a child comes to the mother, um, and there's already this knowing at from
Yeah.
from both souls. But if we are, as
Wow.
women or as humans, disconnected from our soul, then we may not feel that. But there is that reconnection with the soul when the mother
Yes.
makes that decision to that, what, this isn't the right
Hmm.
time, or I'm in an abusive relationship, or whatever the
Yes.
issue may be. And there's no, whatever that reason is, to me, is irrelevant, because it's about the mother's soul making that decision that the child is already aware of before it came. And in a different way to, you know, going back to your story around the ectopic, like I've heard many women who have gone through, have experienced that termination, and they've made that decision, and it's led them on a totally different journey. You know, they may get into supporting young women who are going through something similar, or it finally having the courage to break away from that relationship. Or it may mean a decision like you realize, yes, I do want children later on, or I don't want children later on. And so to me, that's the main difference. There's a lot of a similar purpose, but it's more about which soul initiates that that process of leaving. And
amazing.
And it's a really incredible, again, on the soul level. And I just want to point out that often the soul's experience and journey it can be incredible for the soul, but brutal for us as a human, and very confronting. And all of those big feelings. So I don't want to ever dismiss that, because at the end of the day, we're all human.
No.
But from when we go through these things, it's incredibly expansive, and there's so much growth there for us as souls. And the same with a termination or an abortion. Like when a woman makes that decision, it's a huge learning journey for her soul about being empowered by making a decision that feels right for her. And this can be blurred a little bit if there's pressure as well. You know, if there's external pressure into that, you know, that can muddy the water a little bit, and that's a whole other conversation. But for the majority of women, it's that the time isn't right, or I'm not ready, or this isn't what I want. And it is sort of
or like you said, you know, like this. And like I said, encourage them, it confronts them to perhaps make a decision, like I need to leave this relationship, which is, you know, like I said, is not pleasant at a physical level. It's not pleasant, you know, in day-to-day kind of living. But hadn't they not gone through that, perhaps they would stay in that relationship and, you know, and just keep living an unhappy life. And, you know, and I think we human beings are very good at only making hard decisions when we have to, when our backs are against the wall, right? Like we wait for that moment, you know, like, and I think part of it is almost like like I said, the soul might not be connected to it, but underlining, you know, the soul is connecting to the energy of like, I need to make this decision, but I don't know how. And it's almost like you manifest that situation so you can go on a journey to learning and actually making that decision, right?
Absolutely. And I personally believe, and again from my experience, is I don't believe that in any of those situations where life or death are concerned, you know, we can't make the wrong decision, because the process is so much bigger than us. It's so much bigger than just our decision to make right. It's like this big, vast cosmic picture that none of us really understand when it comes to coming to Earth and leaving again, and where do we come from, where do we go to? Like, it's huge. It's too big in many ways for our brain to comprehend and to hold that. So, you know, I believe that we can make the wrong decision in those situations. You know, and I find that when women hear that and they can understand it in a way that's specific to their own journey, it can bring a lot of peace and relief, and they can finally put down that guilt and shame that they've been carrying.
And shame, I know.
Because babies never, those babies that have left the earth through to termination or abortion, whenever I connect with those souls, they're never angry. They are never, there's no resentment. There's no negativity at all. They're actually usually quite neutral about it, other than what upsets them the most is how much their mother is suffering. How much of that responsibility that she has taken on. That tends to be what upsets them, if anything. But in themselves and their journey, there's no guilt, no nothing, no resentment. They're not angry at all.
That's beautiful.
And because the way they see it is like, well, that's how it was meant to be. That's what we agreed. And again, it's hard. Like, even as I say that, it's hard for my brain to comprehend that as well. But that's been the experiences that I've had with these babies.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think we have covered so much, and I think the work that you're doing is so important and so beautiful. And I think it's incredible. I think we really need you in the world. We really need your work supporting women and families and babies in this
Thank
journey
you.
that, it can be quite frustrating, quite sad, depressing.
Yeah.
It can be quite negative, but it doesn't have to be like that.
No.
Or like you said, it's just about reconciling and acknowledging maybe our emotions, that
Hmm.
we are going to have to feel during the process, but just asking the why and being curious about it, which is really, really beautiful. So, how can people reach out to you? I think that's the most important because I hope that lots of people reach out for your support, which, yes, I can't wait. It's just amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. So my business is Born Energy. So you can find me
Yeah.
at my website, which is bornenergy.com.au. That's probably the easiest way to find out what I do. I've got all my services listed there. But just as a brief idea, I offer baby soul readings in different levels of depth, depending on where the woman is at and how much she's ready to receive.
Hmm.
So it can just be a really
Yeah.
quick reading on the go, or it can be a really deep hour and a half deep dive into past, present, and future children. So there's that process, and I also
Hmm.
offer sessions for mums once their baby's born, just to help them develop that bond, and I also teach them how
Hmm.
to some
Yes.
really simple energy techniques that they can use to support their baby's digestion, nervous system, and throat
Yes.
for the baby's expression. So they're the main ways that I work with women. I have done some remote energy healing sessions too for babies who may be going through a challenging phase, like if
Hmm.
they are in intensive care. I've done a few of those where babies in
Yes.
intensive care, and I can send some energetic support to them. Um, so they're the main offerings
Amazing.
that I have, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, both of those under
Instagram.
Born
Yeah.
Energy as well. So you can find me there.
Awesome. I'll add the links below so
Hmm.
people can just connect with you on Instagram and on your website as well. But thank you
Hmm.
so much for sharing with us, your journey and all your learnings as well. It's been amazing to have you. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having this platform to bring these kinds of issues to the light, so that women don't have to carry these burdens around anymore.
Yeah.
So thank you for your platform and your voice as well. That's needed as well.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thanks, Angelica.
Take care.
Bye.